They say a mother's love is unconditional, but what happens when that love comes with a velvet rope and you're perpetually standing on the wrong side of it? I spent 30 years watching my mother polish my brother's trophies until they gleamed, while she never even bothered to look at the medals I won, never even noticed that I had stopped competing altogether.
This isn't just a story about being the second child. It's about being the invisible echo in a house dedicated entirely to another person's spotlight. From the moment my brother, Liam, entered the world 2 years before me, he was the sun, a golden, charismatic, perfectly behaved sun. I was the moon, reflecting only the light he cast, if anyone bothered to look up. My mother, Vivian, was the ultimate worshiper at the altar of Liam's potential. Every achievement, every clumsy drawing, every mildly impressive recitation of the alphabet was met with an explosion of pride, documented meticulously in photo albums that swelled yearly until they threatened to burst their seams. For Liam, birthday parties were extravaganzas, catered, themed events with professional photographers and towering custom cakes. I remember his 10th birthday, the one with the meticulously sculpted rocket ship cake, sugar-spun flames shooting off the sides. The guests oohed and awed, and my mother beamed, standing beside Liam like a curator next to a masterpiece. 2 months later, my 10th birthday arrived. I got a store-bought chocolate sheet cake, the kind with the generic plastic flowers glued haphazardly on top. We ate it quickly after a hurried dinner, because Liam had an early soccer practice the next morning. When I tried to show her a ribbon I'd won that week for a short story competition, she nodded vaguely, her eyes already scanning the countertops for Liam's expensive, custom-fitted cleats. "That's nice, Alara," she'd murmur, the phrase having the emotional weight of a discarded dust rag. "Did you make sure Liam packed his shin guards? He has a big game Saturday." That was the pattern of my youth. Liam's accomplishments were national news. Mine were polite footnotes, swiftly dismissed in favor of the next chapter of his glory. It wasn't that my mother was intentionally cruel. She simply suffered from a spectacular, debilitating case of tunnel vision. Liam was destined for greatness, and her life's mission became ensuring that path was perfectly smooth, paved with gold and brightly lit. I was simply background noise, a predictable fixture in the periphery that didn't require maintenance or attention. She saw me, but she didn't look. She heard me, but she didn't listen. I started seeking approval elsewhere, starved for validation. I became a relentless academic perfectionist. I earned straight A's, took advanced placement classes, and volunteered hundreds of hours. I hoped that undeniable objective success would finally break through the golden shield surrounding Liam. Once, when I got accepted into a prestigious summer science program, a huge deal for a 15-year-old, I rushed home, heart pounding with a cautious, fragile hope. I found my mother in the kitchen, sorting through university brochures. Liam, a rising high school junior, was already being aggressively recruited by colleges for his debate skills. I showed her the acceptance letter, the heavy embossed seal, and she paused only long enough to slide it across the granite counter. "That's lovely, Ilar," she said, her voice preoccupied. "But look at this. Duke wants Liam to visit in the fall. They sent him this personalized letter. Do you think we should go for the whole weekend? We need to make a good impression." My news was instantly relegated to a distraction from the main event. In that moment, the fragile hope shattered, replaced by a cold, protective shell. I learned that day that achieving greatness would not win me her attention. Only being Liam would. This emotional neglect wasn't a series of sharp blows. It was the slow, insidious drain of oxygen. It taught me to be fiercely independent, but also deeply isolated. My room became my sanctuary, my fortress, while the living room buzzed with laughter, planning sessions, and animated phone calls about Liam's future. My space was silent, organized, and emotionally barren. I started doing everything on my own: college applications, financial aid forms, scheduling my own dental appointments. I never once asked for help because I knew the answer would be silence, or worse, resentment for pulling her focus away from Liam's trajectory. When I finally left for college, the departure was anticlimactic. Liam's move the previous year had involved a rented U-Haul, 3 family members, and a tearful, dramatic farewell speech from my mother about how the house would feel empty without her golden boy. My own departure involved my small car, 2 suitcases, and a quick, dry hug from Vivian in the driveway. "Be safe, dear." "Call if you need anything," she said, already turning toward the house to answer a ringing phone that was undoubtedly Liam calling from his new dorm room. The silence on my drive was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't the sound of sorrow. It was the sound of relief. Years rolled into decades. I built a life several states away, professional, organized, successful, the kind of life that requires no emotional maintenance from others. My contact with my family became minimal. Mandated holiday visits, polite, practiced exchanges of pleasantries, and phone calls that inevitably circled back to Liam. Liam married well, started a prestigious law firm, and gave Vivian the perfect, beautiful grandchildren she had always envisioned. Every Christmas card was a photo montage of his perfect life, curated by Vivian, who forwarded them to everyone she knew with little notes gushing about her brilliant son. My life, quiet and fulfilling in its own way, rarely came up. When it did, it was usually framed as a lack. "It's so nice you're doing well in your career, Alara, but when are you going to settle down? Liam and Sarah are already planning their 3rd child." I learned to wear a mask of breezy indifference, a well-polished facade that allowed me to endure the inevitable slights without betraying the constant dull ache beneath my ribs. I remember one family dinner, about 5 years ago. I was talking about a major professional project I had spearheaded that had won national recognition. I was genuinely proud. I saw a flicker of something in my mother's eyes, maybe interest, maybe curiosity. But then Liam interrupted, smoothly pivoting the conversation to a potential corporate merger he was managing. My mother immediately leaned forward, her entire posture shifting, radiating interest and pride, asking detailed, challenging questions about his strategy. I finished my wine and simply let the conversation wash over me, the invisibility cloak settling securely back into place. That evening crystallized the absolute permanence of the situation. Nothing I did would ever matter as much as the breath Liam took. I accepted it. I stopped trying. Then came the crisis, the one thing that broke the pattern, shattered the pedestal, and forced a confrontation that had been 30 years in the making. It was late October. I was in a demanding meeting when my phone buzzed with an urgent call from my father. His voice was cracked, raw. Liam had suffered a major health event, a sudden, severe neurological episode, and was in the ICU, placed in a medically induced coma. It was unexpected, brutal, and terrifying. The prognosis was uncertain. I immediately booked the first flight home. When I arrived at the hospital, the scene was chaos, centered entirely around my mother, Vivian. The woman who was always so composed, so organized, so effortlessly perfect, was unraveling. She was pacing the hallway, hysterical, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She was unable to absorb the complex medical jargon the doctors were delivering. Her golden idol was broken, and she had no blueprint for this kind of catastrophe. She couldn't fix it, couldn't celebrate it, and couldn't control it. Liam's wife, Sarah, was doing her best, but she was overwhelmed, dealing with the shock and managing their small children. My father, steady as a rock, was trying to manage my mother, who kept dissolving into tears. I walked in, and the lifetime of training in emotional suppression and forced independence kicked in. While they were grappling with the emotional tidal wave, I was functioning entirely on autopilot. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just started managing. I talked to the chief physician, taking notes on the differential diagnoses, the medication protocols, and the risk factors. I set up a rotation schedule for visitors. I made sure my father ate. I managed the flood of well-meaning but draining phone calls. I brought order to the chaos. My years of being the quiet, reliable observer, the one who never required emotional labor, had prepared me perfectly for this logistical nightmare. For the next 2 weeks, I was Vivian's shadow, the anchor she didn't realize she needed.
She was too consumed by Liam's plight to see me clearly, but she relied on my competence entirely. Ilara, what did the neurosurgeon say about the prognosis? Ilara, can you coordinate the visitation list? I can't think straight. Ilara, can you bring me a coffee? I can't leave the floor. I did it all, silently, efficiently.
I wasn't doing it for her approval. I was doing it because it needed to be done, and I cared about Liam despite everything. Then came the night of the confrontation. Liam's condition had stabilized marginally, but the fear was still suffocating the waiting room. It was 2 a.m. My father and Sarah had gone home briefly to rest. It was just me and Vivian in the sterile, fluorescent-lit silence.
The rhythmic beeping of the monitors down the hall was the only sound. Vivian hadn't slept properly. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors down the hall was the only sound. Vivian hadn't slept properly in days. She looked ancient, her perfect composure completely gone. She was slumped in a molded plastic chair, staring blankly at the institutional artwork on the wall. "You know," she murmured, her voice thin and ragged, like old silk tearing, "I don't know how I would manage this without you. You're so strong, Ilara, so capable." I continued scrolling through the doctor's notes on my tablet, updating the care chart. I paused. The word strong echoed in the silence, ringing false and sharp. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment of utility. I didn't look up immediately. I took a deep, steadying breath, recognizing the precipice we were standing on. This was the moment.
After 30 years, the wall between us was finally weakened enough by fear and exhaustion to crack. "I learned how to be strong a long time ago, Mom," I said, my voice deliberately flat, devoid of the emotion she usually expected. I had to. She shifted uncomfortably in the chair. "What do you mean, dear?" I finally looked up.
My eyes met hers, and I saw a flicker of confusion, quickly replaced by defensive discomfort. I mean, I had to learn to be strong, because I learned very early on that if I needed help, I wouldn't get it. I stated plainly. I wasn't angry. The anger had calcified into something hard and cold years ago. I was just delivering historical fact.
"Ilara, that's not fair," she whispered, her eyes filling with instant tears, the easy tears of self-pity, not genuine remorse. "Isn't it?" I countered, folding my hands neatly in my lap. "Do you remember my first ever violin recital in 4th grade? The one where I spent 3 months practicing the Bach piece until my fingers bled?" She hesitated. "Of course I remember Liam's debate tournament that same weekend. It was very important." "No," I corrected gently. "You remember Liam's debate tournament. You sent Dad and Grandma, but you told me you had a terrible migraine and couldn't come. Then Dad called home during intermission, and I overheard you cheering loudly in the background."
You were watching Liam's debate live stream on the laptop, drinking champagne with Mrs. Henderson. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "And do you remember when I applied to State University, the one with the incredible robotics program? I filled out every piece of paperwork alone." "You were so busy hiring an expensive college consultant for Liam to ensure he got into Yale, you never even looked at my application essay. You didn't know the name of the program I was accepted into until I had already paid the deposit." My voice remained level, meticulous, listing the evidence as if reading from a sterile legal brief. "When I won the National Award for Urban Planning 2 years ago, the one I mentioned at dinner, you asked if I had seen Liam's new boat yet. You didn't even remember the name of my award. You've never once called me just to ask about my work, my health, or my happiness. Every conversation is a debriefing on Liam's latest triumph, or a gentle suggestion that I should emulate his life choices." I leaned forward slightly, And the quiet intensity finally broke through her exhausted haze. You didn't ignore me because I was bad, Mom. You ignored me because I was never the problem. Liam needed your constant, manicured attention because his success reflected directly on your identity. He was your masterpiece.
I was just the reliable, quiet shadow who required no maintenance, allowing you to dedicate all your emotional energy to him. You didn't realize that emotional neglect is not the absence of malice, it is the absence of recognition. And recognition, for a child, is oxygen. Vivian began to sob, not the theatrical, performative tears she used to garner sympathy, but deep, racking sobs of genuine horror. The realization, delivered not with accusation, but with quiet, devastating factuality, had finally landed. It hadn't been a lack of love. It had been a catastrophic misallocation of it. She had loved Liam with every visible fiber of her being, and she had loved me only in the abstract, the theoretical, the child she didn't have to worry about. "Oh, Alara," she gasped, covering her face with shaking hands. "Oh God, I was so blind, so utterly, selfishly blind." The sound of her anguish didn't give me the satisfaction I might have craved 20 years ago.
It only felt heavy, sad, and overdue. "It wasn't just the big things, Mom," I continued, needing her to understand the depth of the damage. "It was the everyday silence. The way you always made sure Liam's favorite cereal was in the pantry, but you never knew mine. The way you knew the name of his elementary school principal and every one of his teachers, but you once introduced me to a friend as the smart one who lives far away. You never asked me what made me happy, only what made me useful." She lifted her head, her face blotchy and ravaged by tears. "I am so sorry. I didn't know. I never saw it. I truly believed I was a good mother to both of you." "That's the tragedy, Mom," I said softly. "You thought you were, but the truth is, you raised a son who felt he was deserving of the world's praise, and you raised a daughter who felt she was deserving only of silence. And the silent daughter is the one who had to come back and hold your world together when the golden son finally faltered." We sat in that harsh, sterile light for what felt like an eternity. The apology finally came, heavy and raw, repeated over and over. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Alara." I accepted the apology because it was real this time. It was fueled by the stark terror of loss and the clarity brought by exhaustion and crisis. But accepting it didn't heal 30 years of emotional starvation. Liam eventually stabilized and started the long, arduous road to recovery. He would be okay, though changed. As he slowly regained consciousness, Vivian finally started to look at me differently, not just as her capable logistics manager, but as her daughter. She started asking questions about my life, genuinely listening to the answers. She started noticing the small things, my favorite coffee, the way I organize my notes, the quiet rhythm of my existence. But the relationship is forever marked by the damage. You cannot rebuild a skyscraper that was constructed on a foundation of sand overnight. I am cautious, guarded, and maintain a polite distance. I can love her, but I cannot give her the instantaneous, easy intimacy of a daughter who was always truly seen. The regret she carries now is a heavy mantle, and it is a regret she will have to wear for the rest of her life. She is learning that favoritism doesn't just damage the neglected child, it irreparably wounds the parent when they finally wake up and realize the magnitude of the love they failed to nurture. The lesson I learned and the lesson I want to share is this. When you polish one star until it blinds you, you miss the quiet constellation of brilliance forming just beyond your gaze. Emotional neglect leaves a different kind of scar than abuse. It leaves a void, a permanent silence where affirmation should have been. And while a parent might eventually find the courage to apologize, the child must then decide if they have the energy
or the desire to teach the parent how to love them properly, decades too late. This story, Video 4, is about that quiet decision. It's about the cost of being the reliable one, the strong one, the one who carried the family through the darkness, only to realize that the reward for stability was being eternally overlooked. If you are living this story, if you are the echo in a favorite house, know that your strength is real, but your need for love is real too. And if you are a parent watching this, please look closely at the shadows in your life. Stop polishing the trophy child for just a moment and ask yourself, who is standing quietly in the corner, and what have you unintentionally broken with your silence? I want to know if this resonates with you. Tell me in the comments below, what was the small, ordinary moment when you realized you were the favorite, or when you realized you were the overlooked one? Share your story, however quiet or loud it may be. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that explore the hidden truths of family dynamics.